Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody again to the Unlocking Engineering Data webinar with TechSoft 3D. Our presenters today are Dave Opsahl, Vice President of Corporate Development, and Jonathan Giroir, who is Technical Marketing Manager for the Hoops product line. They're going to walk through a few slides, and then Jonathan, otherwise known as Demo Man, is going to give a quick demo of Hoops Published and how quickly and easily you can create an interactive 3D PDF. So, handing it over to Dave and Jonathan.
Thanks a lot, Angela. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for giving us an hour of your time today, and we hope that you will find it to be worthwhile. Before we start talking about the topic, I just want to introduce anyone who's not familiar with TechSoft to who we are and what it is that we live for. And we are the largest provider of component technology for technical applications for manufacturing, for architecture, engineering, construction, and it is a goal of ours to enable people to develop innovative applications primarily built around the need for using 3D data in applications, and watching companies like yours develop an innovative solution using those components. When we see someone who's used our components build a solution and be successful with it, there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction we get from that. And it's because we decided to try to tackle hard problems that other people don't want to deal with. And we're going to talk about one of those today. So the theme for this talk is really, how do I extract the value that's been built into the definition of a manufactured product, let's say. So there's something I think we can all identify with, and that is that design has become much more involved, both from the sense of the complexity of the product that we're building and the work that goes into trying to do as much of that virtually as possible, from an analysis, prototyping standpoint, and so on. And it is becoming more and more critical that we find a way to enable stakeholders in the process to gain access to that information and add value to it, where their particular workflow is targeted at bringing some additional value into that. To give you an idea of the top end of the scale of what we're talking about here, in the 60s, Boeing spent 28 months and several tens of millions, around $35 million, developing the 747. The most recent aircraft, the 787, took something on the order of 66 months and $30 billion. So what's changed in there? Well, apart from the complexity side of it, in that earlier example, 90% of the product was made in-house at Boeing. Today, 90% of that is outsourced. So you have all these stakeholders, and that group expands beyond the owner-operator, or to include the owner-operators, of people who need to be able to leverage what's contained in that rich virtual definition, that model-based definition, across a variety of workflows. And that's not an easy thing to do. Why? Well, if it were easy, we wouldn't see people communicating and collaborating in the same way that they have for the last 25 years. About the best you can say is that a lot of what used to be distributed in paper is now distributed digitally, but it's still a paper representation at the end of the day. So if you throw into that all the complications around requiring people to use proprietary viewers or limited forms of definition like IGES, it's pretty clear that if we're going to attack this problem, someone has to figure out, all right, what's the easy way to do that? How do I enable unlocking that data in my application without having to do a lot of the foundational work that needs to be done? For that reason, we created something called Hoops Publish, and we're going to talk today about what Hoops Publish is and what it will enable you to do. But publishing really allows you to lump workflows into three different categories, and we're going to touch briefly on each of those three. But at the end of the day, regardless of the workflow, what we're trying to do is make sure that whatever data that's contained in that definition is capable of being used in an asset for any kind of workflow attached to that product, whether we're at the design stage, manufacturing engineering stage, or once it's in service. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and as we get into these details, we really do ask if you have questions, please just type them into the questions pane, and we'll be taking periodic breaks to answer those. There will also be an opportunity at the end of the webinar too to field questions. So please feel free to do that. It makes for a much more interesting presentation for everybody. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Jonathan. So let's talk generally just about the primary function that Publish serves. So if I have a collection of product definition data, what I need to be able to support most workflows is some additional information that's related to perhaps a process. So one way to think about this is if I am wanting to create something for maintenance, repair, and operation. There's process information about what's the right disassembly and reassembly sequence, what servicing goes on in between. That information typically is never stored with the product itself. It's stored somewhere in another application. Another example would be a need to get material information out of an ERP system that's relevant to an object. So if I wanted to be able to query on, who's the manufacturer of something and what the stock levels are, those sorts of things are coming from an external source. Regardless of the organization I'm part of, I want to be able to present that information in a consistent form depending on the workflow. So for example, if I'm a manufacturer of components for a variety of different customers and industries, I'm going to be hopefully standardized on the same first article inspection process, and I want the information relevant to that process to present it in the same way. So I want to organize this in a fashion that's sensible for the individual customer. So Hoops Publish, its main role is to allow you a very easy way of aggregating all of that information and then driving it down through one of these three categories of workflows that we're going to talk about. And we've tried to do that in a way that makes it as easy as possible on the developer to do that with a minimal amount of effort. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Central to this whole concept is, the idea that if you want to be able to publish all the relevant information, you have to have a data model that allows you to contain all of that information. And for us, that data model is something called PRC. PRC is an ISO standard and has the ability to represent not only geometry in a variety of different ways, but all of the ancillary information that's needed for the presentation of that. So, for instance, in the authoring or design system, I've spent, or someone has spent quite a bit of time organizing information in a set of VTL views. If you're a CATIA user, those are captures. But there's some analogous element in every authoring system out there. We can retain all of those and represent those in PRC, as well as attribute data, any kind of product structure that you have in terms of the model tree. All of that needs to be part of the representation. So with that data model, we're able to import from any standard format with Publish on its own, or when buckled with Exchange, we can bring that in directly from CAD formats. We're not going to talk specifically about Exchange today, but if you have questions on that, let us know. You also have the ability to author directly out of your application, so no standard data, but your application and the data that it's represented. And the API allows you to get fairly granular in what you want to present in that particular publishing activity. So we can include or exclude any of the items that you see on the list. And this is going to be important later on when we talk about being able to make files that are compact or files that don't include sensitive information. So let's talk about the first of these generalized workflow categories. So Jonathan, question?
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned Hoops Exchange, Dave. So we have one question. They'd be interested in a future Exchange demo or a webinar. We're going to show a little bit of the Exchange functionality in the demos later. But also we do encourage you to check out our YouTube channel, TechSoft 3D YouTube, where you will find a recent webinar that talks about Hoops Exchange, particularly with the integration that we have with Siemens Parasolid, but a tremendous amount of information there just about what Exchange is and what it does, as well as a customer highlight with DP Technology. They're a CAM software vendor with their Esprit software package. But yeah, there's a lot of resources there as well as on our website in terms of different content that you can explore for Exchange, for data access, and then our visualization toolkits as well.
Great. Thanks for that. Thanks for the question as well. Anyway, so if we get back to this archiving and interoperability set of workflows, you can think of things like the need to exchange data with a potential supplier, which means that they've got to have the precise geometric definition to be able to do some estimates on. Long-term archiving, if you have a long life cycle product like the aircraft we were mentioning earlier, obviously, having that data around for a long time is a requirement. We also have something that falls into this category, which is regulatory compliance. A question we had in a previous webinar on this topic was, why do I even need to have a document? Well, for the foreseeable couple of decades, most regulatory agencies are going to require that you submit a document. Therefore, just simply giving them access to a website isn't going to solve that problem. So regardless of those workflows, we give you the ability to output out of publish to any of these standard formats, retaining as much of the information as you wish or as much as the standard will allow you to retain. So that's one set of workflows. Another set of workflows is just generalized visualization and collaboration. So we talked a little bit earlier about how 90% of the 787 is outsourced to a very wide network of stakeholders. All of those stakeholders need to have access to a lot of this data and participate in a lot of design decisions. So how do I make that accessible to them? So we realize that there's cases for instance, a design review workflow where creation of a document for the sake of retaining that may not be necessary, but it could be one way in which I want to communicate to people. The other is I may want to just simply export HTML. So when we talk about both of these, we're talking about something that we would refer to as 3D on the page. So I'm giving you a 3D representation that you can interact with that contains a lot of the information that's contained in the authoring system, but presented primarily in the same way that the authoring system would present it. And for visualization, we give you a choice of both, and the same data can be published in both ways, meaning that once I set up what it is that I want them to see, I could elect to do one or both of these to solve that set of workflows. Lastly, there's an area that we're seeing a lot of recent traction in. In this area, we would call using the 3D PDF capabilities inherent, the 3D capabilities inherent in the PDF platform to create an app-like experience, either on a desktop, on a mobile device, or in a browser. And I'll explain a little bit more what I mean by that in a second. First thing to mention here is that the PDF platform is already used in almost every workflow you can imagine. Including the ones that are up here on the screen, largely because of how easy it is to move that information around, how consumable it is for everyone else, and the addition of 3D data into a PDF file gives you the capability for a much better user experience, and I think we'll give you some proof of what we mean by a much better user experience here in a minute. Just a couple of notes, if you aren't familiar with some of the characteristics about PDF, not surprisingly, we find that a lot of people in manufacturing and engineering really don't know what you can do with PDF. So this is generally pretty helpful for people. But essentially, PDF itself is a container, and I can put almost any kind of media in there that I want to. I can also include data that is metadata pulled from another system in the form of lists and things like that. I can create packages that have multiple documents in them, whether PDF files or in some cases even Office documents. Those can be referenced so that you can link between them within the PDF file. And you can also include attachments. So, one example here I would use is that if you're submitting something to a potential or a prospective supplier and you want to include the step file, you can simply include that as an attachment to the PDF file, whether there's 3D data elsewhere in the PDF file or not, and forward that directly to someone. Chances are it will flow exactly through their firewall the way it was supposed to. So this is one of the benefits of PDF, this ability to function like a container. But there's also capabilities that have been in that platform for quite a while that allow you to create a very interactive experience for people. So if you take the template concept we talked about a little bit earlier and imagine that I'm going to have an interactive 3D area in this document someplace, I'd like to be able to relate to that 3D data, the non-graphic data that's associated to it. So for example, if I have a parts list, that list is going to exist as text someplace in the document. If I click on an item, I'd like to be able to see where that exists in the 3D scene, or vice versa, be able to click an item in the 3D scene after I've rotated, got the orientation I want, and be able to see what non-graphic information does that refer to. So this is the kind of interactivity we're talking about. I'd like to be able to navigate easily through views or change display states. So those are all things that create a very rich interactive experience, and they are part of the platform. So one of the things Jonathan's going to do is, when he gives you the demos, is show you a little bit about what some of these things are. So for instance, most of us are familiar with this notion of having a set of thumbnails that we can navigate through a virtual ribbon bar. We call those a view carousel. We talked a little bit about parts lists. Buttons that initiate certain actions and allow you to change the visual state, or assembling an animation, or representing a barcode to track something as it moves, through a factory. Those are all things that are just standard capabilities in PDF. And what we've done with Publish is give you the ability to use via API calls Publish to create all of these. So for example, to create a view carousel, all I have to do is provide the coordinates on the page where I want that view carousel to show up. So Jonathan's going to show you some of that. A lot of the value in Publish is that we are doing all of this for you. If you had to do it by hand, by yourself, this would be a very onerous undertaking. Lastly, in order to be able to give the kind of experience we want to be able to make sure that you can consume the HTML or the PDF file on any device, on any platform, and on any browser. And so we have technology, for instance, that will allow you to consume a 3D PDF with this interactive behavior on it inside a browser without having any Adobe Reader plugin installed on the machine. So this gets around some of the concerns people have with Adobe Reader still being a 32-bit application, and so on and so forth. So I'd like to turn it over to Jonathan so he can put some realism behind some of the stuff that we've talked about.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Dave. And while we're getting set up for that, if there are any questions that may have come up, please type them into the console there, and we'd be happy to answer them for you. All right, so Dave talked through an awful lot there about how to take your engineering data and publish it into numerous different forms. We're going to show that in practice. So here I have a Windows-based application that takes a number of our different toolkits and wraps it into a demo. This isn't end-user software by any means, but it's just a way of showing our SDKs to give you some context around how you might be able to use them. Now, you don't have to deploy, as Dave mentioned, just on Windows, but you can build your application on any of the major operating systems that we support. We do have a question here. How does Hoops Visualize integrate with Publish? Which is fantastic, because that's exactly what we're showing here. In fact, the integration between Hoops Exchange for reading data in. So what I've done in this application is I have read in a Pro-E assembly of a pump assembly here. and I'm going to activate one of those views. So it's a 3D model, has 3D data associated with it. There's visualization data in terms of PMI associated with geometry. There's a number of different views on how you might assemble this. And so there's this integration between Exchange, bringing data in, and then I'm going to show you once we add some additional metadata to this session, we're able to combine all of it and push it out using Hoops Publish. How are they integrated? Well, the content that might exist in your Hoops Visualize Scene Graph, or you bring in using Hoops Exchange and exists as part of that data access, that can immediately be pushed into Hoops Publish. It's literally just one line of code. Take the data in whatever form it is in and then push it into a PDF. But what we want to do is show you some advanced workflows. Dave was talking about PDF as an application and supporting these advanced workflows, not just 3D on a page, but all of the additional context around that. So that's what we'll show you today.
We've got another question from Jason. So the views that you see on the left came directly from the part that you pulled in?
That is correct. So this original assembly has a number of different PMI views, as well as different views when it comes to assembling it. And that's the whole the purpose of this demo, is to show how to assemble this pump assembly and create a set of work instructions for someone to follow. So using Hoops Exchange, we're able to bring in all of the PMI views that are originally associated with the assembly or the particular part. You can also author them as well through our SDK. So if I didn't have them here and the design engineer didn't create them, that's something we could add an interface for and create as well. Another question? Nope. Okay, great. So we have the 3D data in our application. We also have a notes pane here. It's just part of the demo. And it allows me to enter in specific notes. If I wanted to, I could create a view and add a note, but here our views are already created, so we're going to start adding our notes here. And this is a set of work instructions that we're going to assemble this pump with. The first one might be weld the axle to impeller. And we go to another view, and that gets saved off into memory. Here a bearing has been pressed onto that, so the instruction would be press bearing onto axle. And then our third one, let's say, would be insert impeller into housing. And we could go through each of these different instructions, glue the gasket onto the housing, apply the base plate, insert the bolts, and torque to a certain specification, and then you're finished with that. So what I could do now is export to a PDF, and we'll push it into my temp folder, let that kind of go off and do things. But what I want to show you is exactly what we're going to push it into. So instead of just a dumb PDF, we want to push it into a meaningful template. And I'm going to show you my workflow. There is numerous ways in which you could generate a template, including doing so programmatically. So I could go in and show you each programmatically set up. I want an icon, and I want a box, and I want some text, and that's part of the API. But there's a real seamless and quick way of doing it, and that's by starting with an existing PDF and just populating fields in the PDF. But the question always comes up, how do I create that original PDF? Well, I'm not a designer, I'm a programmer. However, I end up using PowerPoint a fair amount. So I've created just a page here in PowerPoint and saved it as a PDF. So literally by inserting an image and putting some text on the page and creating some boxes, we're able to create a document that looks pretty similar to what our end users might encounter. And from there, all we did was save it as a PDF. So it really doesn't matter how you generate that PDF, either programmatically or doing so through a graphical user interface like PowerPoint, or an Adobe product like InDesign or PageMaker. You end up with a PDF at the end of the day. We then take that PDF and we name a few of those areas, a few of those fields. So for instance, I've named the center one My 3D Window, and that unique identifier now allows my application here, Hoops demo viewer, when I save that file to a PDF, it uses this template and it populates not just the 3D content and attaches 3D content to that view. There's also an area in the bottom for a view carousel. There's, of course, a notes or work instructions table as well as a parts list table. So if we go in and look at the PDF that we generated, we're going to open that up. We have the 3D content has been enabled. We can go to a specific view. All of our views, and in fact, there's more views in that original data set than you see here, but the demo application has curtailed that just to the work instruction views. And I can step through each of my views that we have added with the notes as well, the work instructions for this particular step, and I can step through those. I didn't populate this work instruction, so it's blank, but I could go through each one of those and add the notes that are needed. Well, how do we do this? We embed 3D data into the PDF file. We also embed a number of images that represent each of these thumbnails of the particular views. But then all the data is organized through a bunch of tables. So we have a table of parts, we have a table of views, we have a table of work instructions and notes. We also have a table of additional metadata that we were able to extract from the original CAD files. So for instance, for this assembly, for the axle, there's a mass units, there's a material, there's a maturity code, a cage code, a description, a part name, a part number, a revision. All of that was in the original CAD file and existed as metadata in memory. And we have a table of all this metadata. And we're able to take all of those tables and combine it in a relational way by doing some programming, by saying this item in this table is related to this item in this table. And when I click on a particular part in this table, repopulate all of these fields accordingly. And this creates a very powerful experience just in the context of a document, but it also enables me to do some pretty interesting things very quickly programmatically. So if you're familiar with relational database programming, that's exactly what we have here. If you're not, it's not quite as scary as SQL, and you're able to do this quite quickly. Any other questions?
Not yet.
Not yet. So be happy to show you those. Dave asked, or we actually did this same webinar recently, and someone asked, well, what about HTML export? And there's a number of different ways to do that. We have the same pump assembly that we've exported to an HTML, and here we can show you this HTML file. I have it here in my temp directory. It's a fully encased HTML with all of the data, with all of the user interface, with all the stylizations. It allows me to look at this data within the context of this HTML. Now what you're not seeing is all the decoration that existed in the PDF because we exported to a different template. There are ways to create that, and many times people want to create their own UI and widgets around this as well. But it gives me a very similar experience where I can have bidirectional selection between the 3D model and my assembly tree. I can isolate a particular part in the assembly tree. I have all of my views. So here's the last. Here's when we insert the impeller into the housing. We can step back and forward through those views. So there are a lot of power here, and in the ability to not have a document but a live HTML that you can either share or, of course, put on the server and allow access in one or more ways.
We've got a couple more questions.
Okay.
Now's a good point.
Now is a good time.
All right. Question from David. Have you scripted data entry to hit cloud storage?
Wow. I think, David, what you might be asking about is data entry in the PDF and then pushing that to a database in the cloud. If that's the case, that isn't something that we have out of the box, but it is there is a back end of JavaScript that allows you to do that within a PDF. I'm not sure if that's the best way to do it, and you can get some power out of that, but there's no API that allows us to do that within.
Well, not from us, but one of the advantages of the PDF platform is there is such a rich ecosystem of tools around there, and potentially, David, if we've understood the question right, oh, okay, wait a second. In other words, can you push data to a database? The answer is absolutely you can. So I think we were on the right track with that previous answer, that there are a lot of tools out there that allow the extraction of data from a PDF file into a database, and where that's most commonly found is where you have forms elements contained in the PDF file. So for example, if you were looking at the PDF Jonathan had here on the screen, just assume for a moment that in that table at the bottom that there are some places where, say, an operator is expected to enter data. Once that data is entered, if it's in form fields, that data can then be extracted by a database. So you see people using this for, storing inspection results would be one thing. And so, if that's the answer or if that satisfied the question, great. If not, let us know, what else we need to do. Jonathan Nikhil is asking, what is the starting point for HTML publish? Is it an HTML template? So I think from, that what he's asking is what do I need to be able to do that?
Right. So from publish, the export to HTML is, as I showed you, I think we still have that up. It's a HTML5 canvas object that it's basically a div you can insert anywhere. That we write an HTML file, but you can easily kind of slice and dice that and use it elsewhere. We have another product that all of our SDKs here at TechSoft are integrated together. We have another product called Hoops Communicator, which in fact is kind of the backbone of this feature that allows for an API for interacting with 3D data in an HTML page. So if you want to extend the functionality of this particular HTML page with numerous workflows, we certainly have tools to do that. But what you see here is essentially what you get from Publish is HTML file that has 3D model in it. It has some navigation and an assembly browser and a view browser here in the left.
Okay. There's another question on here I'm going to go ahead and answer at the moment. It is, where did we go? Hang on a second. There's so many questions coming in that one scrolled out of the line. What advantage? This is a question from Jamie. What advantages do you offer over your competitors like Anarch? So first of all, we don't compete with Anarch, and so that answer probably needs a little explanation in and of itself. I should mention Anarch is a partner of ours. They do use some of our technology, but they do not use Hoops Publish, which we're talking about right now. So while we don't compete with Anarch, there are people Anarch competes with who do use Hoops Publish. So let me give you an example of the difference. One of the things that Anarch's solution does is a lot of what you're seeing here in terms of the interactive behaviors, the relationships between things. What Hoops Publish allows you to do is organize those in terms of that PRC data model. So we know the relationships exist because they're in the database, in the tables that Jonathan mentioned earlier. With Anarch, what they're doing, and it's just a different approach, and there are advantages and disadvantages to it, is they are defining all of those things outside of the PRC data model and doing it in JavaScript. So while that gives them some additional, fine-grained control, it also tends to create a very, very large PDF file that can take a long time to generate. The advantage that we have, or that the users of Hoops Publish have, so this would be other folks like Theorem or ProStep, what they're able to do is they're able to use the PRC data model to create a very compact PDF file and retain those things, those relationships inside the database itself. So hopefully that answered the question. But just to summarize, we don't compete with them, but the approach that we use is different than the one that they're using.
I have another answer, another question. I just want to clarify here. So when it comes to HTML template, I'm not a web developer, but my understanding is that is a HTML concept that we can support, but what you get out of publish is not exactly an HTML template. But you can wrap it as such. Like I said, you get an HTML page with a div, and we render it's a WebGL object into that div. But it's quite extensive, and yeah.
Here's another question from James. For the 3D PDF, how do you create the tagged region in the template that was called My 3D Window?
Yeah. Excellent question, James. Thanks for bringing that out. That was one little piece of the pie that needs some clarification. So we did use Acrobat to do that. So all of these PDFs exist within and can be viewed with the free Acrobat Reader. But to change the label of a form, you either need to do that programmatically through the SDK, or I have Acrobat installed on my machine, and that allows you to edit a PDF. So Acrobat Reader, of course, is just for reading. Acrobat itself is for editing, and that's where I went in and edited the different fields and created those unique identifiers. Alternatively, you could use other products from TechSoft, particularly our Tetra end user line of products that allows you to kind of do that as well. But those are plugins that exist within Acrobat, but they also accelerate your design time.
There's some more questions. Do you want to go ahead and do a little more demo? Do you want to take some more questions? What do you want to do?
Yeah, let's work through these questions because these are great. Is the HTML5 content supported by all browsers without any help? Well, it's supported by all browsers that support HTML5, and so all your modern browsers, desktop machines are able to do that just fine. So that's Firefox, Chrome, Safari, Internet Explorer, and the Edge browser. All of your mobile devices, at least kind of the more recent mobile devices that have GPUs on them, all of their browsers, when it comes to Chrome for Android or Safari for iOS, as long as they support HTML5 and WebGL, you're able to render these HTML files within there. There's legacy browsers and legacy devices that don't support WebGL, and you won't be able to do that. There is some technology here at TechSoft where we can render on a server and give you a video stream of your models, and that's also an option that is part of the Hoops Communicator product. But if you want backwards compatibility with old devices, that's also an option.
Jonathan, another question. Do you work with any proprietary CAD formats like CATIA, NX, Pro-E, Wildfire, and so on? Adam, yes, we do. That's a capability that's part of the Hoops Exchange SDK. So if in your application you would like to incorporate the ability to consume those and then have that data be used for the publishing process, Exchange is what you would have to license to be able to do that. Jonathan mentioned earlier that we have some presentations similar to this around Exchange that are up on our YouTube channel. We're going to give you some instructions on how to get to that at the end of things today, and we'd be happy to talk to you more about that. Do you provide access to the current demo application and example files so we can explore features and possibilities by ourselves? This is from Tomas.
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. The exact demo that I'm showing today with a notes pane is something that sits on my computer, but there is a much more generally accepted and stable version of the Hoops demo viewer that's accessible by download from TechSoft3D.com. That allows you to import all of your major CAD file formats, including CATIA, NX, Pro-E, and then export them as a PDF using our standard template, which includes at least a view carousel, if not a parts list. The notes pane demo is just something that we've built in here. The PDF that we've generated is also available for download on techsoft3d.com in our Hoops Publish gallery. So you can kind of take a look at what we created.
Let's see, another question. Do you provide access? Oh, no, I'm sorry. We just answered that one. Are you able to dimension in the PDF or generate dimensions for the 3D model from the API?
Yeah, there's lots of ways of doing that. There is a dimensioning tool in Acrobat that allows you to take measurements on your data. Also within Hoops Visualize, we have a set of tools that allow you to add dimensions there as well by clicking on edges, point-to-point, circular arcs, a general set of dimensioning tools, and then also using our APIs if there's very specific things, kind of obscure dimensions that you want access to, those can be built out just because it is an API and we build applications with them.
So Ignacio, one thing we should mention is that sometimes when we get asked this question, it's because people don't want the ability to do that. And the answer is you can identify a PDF as not being eligible to use the extended tools for measurement, but you can also limit the kind of data or the accuracy of the data that you put into the PDF file. So one example of that might be where you have a maintenance and repair procedure that's in a document. Obviously, the measurement data in there is not really of value or what you're interested in, and you may want that to have a much lower level of protection. So the Publish API gives you the ability to decide entirely what level of accuracy and what category of information goes into the PDF file. So hopefully somehow either way we've answered that question for you. Does Exchange use libraries or integration to CAD apps to process data? Concerned about accuracy. You want to take that? I think that's really an Exchange question, but it is kind of a Publish question too.
Yeah, so Hoops Exchange is a standalone SDK that reads CAD file formats without integration to any CAD package. So I can read CATIA data without a seat of CATIA. I can read SolidWorks data without a seat of SolidWorks. So we're not driving the CAD application. We're reading the file, and we have a team that has reverse engineered all these 20+ native CAD file formats and allows you to read that in. And this does have a lot of benefits. It allows for a very efficient set of libraries that are TechSoft SDKs. You don't have to install CATIA or have them bound within your application. It also allows us some autonomy, and we can license to whoever we choose to, because you're not bound by having to be part of a plugin program with a CAD vendor. And in many cases, we give faster data access just because of the way in which we've optimized our reading routines.
I want to add something to Jonathan's answer, Adam, and that is that in the slide we were showing earlier, we talked about the ability for Publish to import data from certain standard formats. So, the accuracy of the data in that case is, ensured by the fact that that's essentially using the same technology for those standard formats that's in Exchange. So the accuracy between, any of those imported formats and what it is that you have to work with the data inside your application is 100%. In the Exchange side, if we're coming directly from a CAD system, in many cases, we don't even translate. For instance, a Parasolid-based application like SolidWorks, the data is never even translated. It's being dealt with natively. So accuracy is not something we have an issue with. We can, give you more details about that in a follow-up if you like. Next question from Srinivas. Can you add a form field using the Publish APIs? And I believe the answer is yes to that. There are certain elements of the PDF libraries that we've included in Hoops Publish that allow you to do some of those things. We've also incorporated some of those capabilities when it comes to being able to generate tables and non-graphic information. Another question from David, can we embed 2D CAD files like floor plans? The answer is absolutely, and this is another one of the great things about you know, the PDF platform in particular is that it really is designed for mixed media. You know, having 2D along with 3D, with audio, with video, any of those collections can be integrated quite nicely into a PDF file. Support of BIM? The answer is yes. There was, in that list of standard formats we import, IFC is one of those. And if there's any other data, you know, coming in one of the other standard formats, Publish will do that all by itself. In terms of format support, like direct support of Revit, we do not have that today. It is something that we're working on, and we do have support in exchange for DWG that has not found its way into Publish yet. So I think the answer there is a qualified yes offering.
Yeah, so a little more information on that. We have a number of partners that are using our SDKs in the construction space and in BIM space, and they own their data, and like they have their own database. Even though there's these standards like Revit and IFC, they end up managing a lot of their data themselves. And because this is an SDK, we talked about bringing data from CAD files, but there's also this whole component of you author your own.
Yeah.
So if you have a database of geometric objects of triangles and colors and assembly structure, using our SDK, you can just push that into a PDF. And we do see a lot of people, especially in this space, authoring data in one way or another from their own database using our SDKs. Another question is Hoops Publish different from Tetra 4D offerings?
I love this question. Yes, Hoops Publish is an SDK. Tetra 4D is a end user solution that is built using the Exchange and Publish SDKs. So that's the difference between them. It's the same technology, it's just one of them is a collection of end user tools, the other is SDKs that allow you to build your own application. Hopefully that answered that question.
Yeah. All right, let's just take a minute here and look at some of the stuff that's new, and then we'll wrap up. But thanks so much for all of your questions. Wanted to show another PDF here that is the result of an inspection report on this particular part. Normally in metrology, if you're doing inspection, you have a particular feature you're interested in and information associated with that, and if it passes or fails inspection. Or I can also edit what's happened. And that's produced in a set of 2D images and tables that are associated with those images, many times pages upon pages upon pages, with just one particular feature that is represented by one page. However, because this is an interactive document, I can take all of that data for each of these features, my different holes. I can navigate through the 3D view or through my list view here of the different things that need to be measured and the results from that. Instead of displaying it in numerous pages, I can just have all of that here within one dynamic document. And one of the new features that we're exposing in Hoops Publish now is the ability to layer and dynamically change layers within a PDF. So here we have this table that actually shows what's occurred in between the hole and the flatness that needs to be inspected. We're able to change a tremendous amount of the visual representation of that data, change the table, change some text, change an icon. But we can also go to a different view. So here, a different PMI view with different features that need to be measured, and I can build up a ton of information within just this one interface.
Yeah, I just want to go back to Ignacio's question before about form fields. So if you look at what's on the screen right now and just imagine that the deviation in there is, you know, an empty field, and imagine that the actual dimension is also an empty field. If you have the nominal dimensions in here and this were a manual inspection process, when the operator types in the actual measured dimension, you can actually calculate the deviation within the PDF file and fill that form field automatically without it ever having to be manually interpreted or done. Jonathan's going to bring up an example you know, that allows you to look at exactly what I'm talking about in here. So you get the same kind of indication of pass fail, but here's where the entries are being entered manually. And the value here is, going back to somebody's question earlier about being able to extract the data, you can store all those entered values in this PDF, and once it's returned to the origin or whatever the next step is in the process, those things can be extracted automatically by a third-party tool and used to populate an SPC database, for example. So go ahead. Okay.
Yep.
Let's see, we got another question from Roman. We use visualize portfolios for creating different views of our models. I don't see how we can export portfolios to publish views. View kit. Roman, it sounds like you might be working with a specific application, and I'm not sure that we can answer that question, right off, but if you get in touch with us, we'd be happy to have a consulting engineer talk to you a little bit about what you're trying to do. Generally speaking, in an authoring system, if this is not one that we currently support, you would be able to author those view definitions directly in the PDF file, but we'd have to help you understand how to do that. So when we get to the end, take a look and give Jonathan or I a shout, and we'll arrange to have you talk to one of the engineers. Jonathan?
Yeah, I think we just need to look at your workflow. I think it's something we can support. We support the ability to generate PDF portfolios. Mm-hmm. That's something that we do. But yeah, let's dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. The purpose of showing you the slide that's on the screen right now is that some of the questions we get really have a lot to do with, is anybody really using this? And the answer is a lot of people. One of the surprising things to us, and what has surprised a lot of the companies that you see listed on the screen here, is just how easy this technology is for their customers to adopt. Because of the barriers that don't exist, given the ubiquity of PDF files and the web and how people deal with that kind of data. So this is real stuff that is being used by some of the biggest companies in the space. So just to summarize, we have a way with the SDK of solving the problem of how you take this rich data and being able to publish it in a workflow-specific form where the consumption is tailored to the way that your customers want to consume that information. It's based around industry standards, and you can extend this to whatever degree you want. If putting out an HTML page with just the 3D data and the markups and PMI information on it is all that you want, that we can do. If, on the other hand, you want to go the next step, create a rich data set that actually can run offline by itself, almost like an app, we can give you that capability. And if you want to consume that PDF file or any of those PDF files inside a browser, we can support that regardless of whether or not it's supported by Adobe Reader. And here's the list of the email addresses for Jonathan and myself. If you've got any other questions, we'd love to hear from you. Chances are we'll put you in touch with one of the consulting engineers. And there's also a YouTube channel. So if you go on YouTube and search for TechSoft 3D, you'll find a YouTube channel there where this webinar and some of the other webinars that we have been recorded.
Yeah, any other questions before we finish up today? We really appreciate everyone's time.
Okay, doesn't look like there are any other questions. Thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to hear from you soon. Have a good week, everyone.